All right, without further ado, I think we'll get our moderator, Gary Perkins, the Chief Information Security Officer for the province. I would also describe him as our Chief Security Evangelist for British Columbia. Why don't you come on up, Gary, and bring your panel with you.
Okay, with that started, we're not going to spend a lot of time on bios. In fact, I think I'm going to ask these folks to introduce themselves. But in addition to that, a skill testing question. If you can tell us each a little bit about yourselves, but also, I believe in delivering value. We've got a lot of very influential people in this room, a lot of C-level executives. So in addition to providing us a little bit about you and what you do and how you do it, can you tell us one thing that they absolutely must be focused on as a C-level executive? Pamela.
Pamela Warren, thanks for having us here this evening. From Palo Alto Networks. Started my career in the US federal government and spent about 10 years there, moved on to vendors and started working supporting government and different industries. And so right now I have a team of professionals from different industries across healthcare and financial services and government. And I think the one thing as I look across all of these industries, consistently, there's a lack of visibility of what's happening in the network. And so I'll just posit that, and we'll, I'm sure, build on that in various themes today. But if you don't know what's happening in your network, it's very difficult to know how to put the appropriate controls in place and then getting to the metrics that we're going to talk about up here. So that's my observation, and thanks again for inviting us here.
Hi, good evening. Vaishali Ghiya, Senior Director of Systems Engineering at Cisco. One thing that I would definitely like you to think about is that keep your customer data safe and keep your company's name showing up in the newspaper, right? The best way to do that, of course, my friend Pamela described visibility. In addition, always think of security as an integrated approach to the networking. Don't think of security as a bolted on or an afterthought. Whenever you're designing network, you should think about security. Whenever you're designing security, you should think about network. And we'll build on this theme as we go along, but that would be one thing I would like you guys to keep in mind.
Hi, my name is Marc Kneppers. I'm the Chief Security Architect for TELUS. So I've been with TELUS for a really long time. I remember Gary when he was at TELUS. So I have a sort of an overarching role for security architecture at TELUS across all our products, so a variety of different things we do. I also do a lot of the long-range sort of strategic planning for some of the architecture we do. I do some of our academic research, so I sponsor our security stuff and a lot of our critical infrastructure and federal government partnerships and things like that. So I sort of have a really super broad and super high-level role, and I am squarely blue team. So my tip is execution. The number of times we see teams not actually delivering on what they said they were going to do, the money they spent, the people they have. And there's outcomes too where we sort of say, like, you know, we want to be safe and secure and we have a process, but the process is broken and it's chosen. So if I were gonna focus on one thing to start with, it's execution. Make sure we're pushed it to the end. That's it for me.
Awesome. My name is Sherry Rumbolt, and I'm the Senior Information Security Officer at National Defense for the West Coast. And I actually served in the Army for 22 years and went to work for Mr. Perkins for a little while and understood a little bit about what's going on in the province. And I just went back to the feds less than 2 years ago, and building a program and managing that program on the West Coast for National Defense and trying to build our cybersecurity strategy and how we're actually building cyber into regular IMIT security for National Defense. So we've got a lot of work to do, that's for sure, and it's really nice to have all these partners and friends that we actually work with on a daily basis, and it's actually helping us educate ourselves within the big bubble of the federal government. And it's nice to actually be working with a lot of my colleagues, because lots of times when you're inside of the federal government, you're sort of siloed. So it's nice to see what's going on out there in the private sector and sort of keep that sort of innovation and technology going. So it's very important. I think that one of the things that I think about a lot is how we can actually people need to understand their business needs and understand the risk within their business and be able to prioritize what it is that they actually need to do. A lot of folks say that they understand their business, but what is it that you're actually trying to protect? Is it the information? Is it to protect yourself against a breach or whatever, or is it to actually, save or keep people from out of harm's way, in our case, in national defense. So it's a lot about, life and limb, the important things of actually keeping people safe when they're actually deployed overseas or in other environments, and then also it's about protecting the information that's in our care. So I think that most executives should really consider that and think of the importance of that information and actually what it is that you're actually trying to do on a daily basis. What is your output? What is this, what are you keeps you awake at night, I guess you could say, and you need to reflect on that.
Great. Saving the best for last.
Yes.
So my name is Espinosa. I lead the security product strategy practice at Splunk. I've always been in the vendor side. So before at Secdo, which got acquired by Palo Alto just recently, Nuix, Guidance Software, cyber forensics for the most part now on the SIM and source side. As far as, so since I work a lot with customers, executives like yourselves, most of them bring to us a variety of challenges, but the most recurring is the ability to scale. And we see that as a challenge, and it's either you have the budget or you need the budget, you need the resources, you need the tools, and typically you don't have all three of them. So working with the resources you have at hand and making sure that your team can multiply itself to combat the cybersecurity bear, right, and look bigger than they are at the moment of an incident when it comes quickly and surprises you, right? So that ability to scale comes very often from our customers.
Cool. So it's occurred to me, and I want to jump off something that Sherry said. The size of this problem is very, very large, right? It's forecasted to be $6 trillion globally, right? That's a significant impact on economies globally. And it sounds like organizations are going to be willing to spend up to $1 trillion to fix this problem. So the folks I feel sorry for are the ones that have to pick and choose how do they prioritize which to focus on from amongst all of the different threats facing their organizations. I'm sure everybody in this room faces that. They've got finite resources. Any of those of you who don't, please let me know. I'll be happy to assist you with that burden. But I do want to see what would be some of the panelists' ideas on how they can best prioritize which risks to focus on and which are the most, because honestly, as security professionals, we're trying to work ourselves out of a job every day, right? There's a lot of very well-established and influential security professionals in the room today. You got some of the best and brightest in the area. They're all trying to work themselves out of a job poorly. We're not being successful here. We're not stopping the threat actors. We're at most delaying them or dissuading them from their intent. So as long as we can't get rid of this problem, how are we best to prioritize where to invest our time and effort? I'm sure the folks here would love to know the answer to that question. Pamela.
So I can start. I'm sure others will have a lot to add here. I think part of it is as our networks are changing, evolving, there's more and more devices. And so now you've got different types of threats now. You might have IoT-related threats, or you might have cloud-related threats. So I think the biggest challenge there is people are trying to fight these one product at a time, or one security technology at a time, or one team at a time. And so consistently what we see is people continuing to work in silos, the processes aren't changing, and it goes to something Marc was talking about with execution, right? So you all have a shared responsibility across your teams, but guess what? They're still working in silos. And it comes at the as a result of all of us as vendors, right, coming out with different products over the years. And so then your teams have become siloed. So the idea here is to bring in automation as much as possible. So it's not which threats you fight all of them. But you use automation to take care of the majority of the threats hitting your network, and then you can have that sweet spot where your teams are really focused on what matters. And so fully leveraging the skill sets that you have, but focusing on the right things instead of chasing the proverbial whack-a-mole that we've talked about for too many years in my career personally. So thinking about automation and how do you apply that automation regardless of where you're looking in your network. So devices, as the cloud changes, you have these things called IoT devices, thinking holistically across the whole of the network and how you can apply and orchestrate security automation across all of them.
I think the way I look at it is it's better to create a magic quadrant of your own. So if y-axis is low risk to high risk, and then x-axis is low security to high security. Then you place your crown jewel assets accordingly. That way at least you get a visual map of what is the most important thing for you to protect and get to a layered defense approach. So everybody should create their own magic quadrant. Low risk to high risk, low security to high security, and it gives you a path forward. Also, hackers have to succeed only once, but we have to succeed all the time, right? So as Ms. Sims pointed out, right, security never stops. It's 24/7. We can never say we have arrived. It's always a journey. It's the train that keeps moving. We are on that endless treadmill, right? So never kind of take eye off the ball and take the budget off of some of the security projects and whatnot. And as Pamela also highlighted, automation is extremely important. All of us are resource strapped. Even as a vendor, I can't hire as many as system engineers as I would like to talk to all of you, right? So we have to do more with less. How do we do that? We kind of do a lot more automation, a lot more virtual system engineering and things like that. So look at how you can do more with less by automating and also comparing yourself to your industry peers, how they are addressing some of the tough security problems. Also look at some of the NIST framework, risk compliance framework and things like that. That gives you a good idea too, right? So those would be some of the nuggets I would say. Create your own magic quadrant, do more with less, and then compare yourself with the industry peers and some kind of risk framework that gives you a good idea of where you are in the securing spectrum.
I don't know what I got left. Like,
Maybe next time we start with
These are some pretty darn good tips, folks. This is distilled down experience you get from these folks that have tried a bunch of things and found what works.
Yes.
The one comment I wanted to just quickly say is Gary was asking for people with unlimited money. And I thought that was the definition of a state-sponsored action.
We're getting there.
I'm just saying, if anyone's got unlimited money, Gary, So I like to Vaishali's points as well as Sherry's points. They ultimately came to crown jewels, which is what I was going to say. And I think there's been most of the times I see there's a failure to truly define the thing that you need to protect and the thing that your business is really worried about. So an example of what we ended up doing was almost, and the problem as well has been that traditionally security has kind of told the business what the security thing is. So you need to protect your email because that's important or whatever. And the struggle is you kind of have to ask, I believe, the business to tell you what is important. So we did an exercise to try and define this because I don't think it's easy. But sort of went through, where's your revenue come from? Where's your operational thing? What's the one thing you could do without or not do without? And from that comes some very interesting things. We make a lot of money on voice phone calls, still, surprisingly. There are a lot of legacy stuff that you don't think you do, and that matters. And so a lot of people who don't want to look at voice switches suddenly need to look at voice switches. But there's sort of other interesting things that fall out. If you look at, I went to our risk management team. The risk management team did this exercise every year, which was a business continuity thing. And they would run around asking teams, what are the 3 processes that have to work for you if the company fails? And so sales would say, I need the address book. I got to call the customers one way or the other. And that's not something I would necessarily have thought of, and there's a variety of these things. And if you do that analysis, you kind of come up with these assets and things. And if technically you can distill that down to, I kind of need to get to that building, and I sort of need to get to here and there. And I think it's that kind of focus, at least, that lets you focus your resources and efforts on something you can actually start defending, because you're not going to defend it all. That's kind of life. And the truth is, you probably don't need to defend it all. You have to put up a defense, but not everyone's laptop is super important. But some things are. So for me, it's about crown jewel definition, which I think is what we've talked about a bit here as well.
Yeah.
Quick opportunity for a poll then. Who in their organization is confident that you have clearly articulated and identified your crown jewels so you can apply your security controls effectively? Oh, come on, surely somebody.
Tell us.
Oh, this problem is way more dire than I thought. Okay, Sherry.
Well, I think I'll just talk from national defense. I mean, we have over 20 networks. So I'm not going to say how many, but we have over 20 networks. Many of them, variety of classifications. So what are we really concerned about? I'll tell you, it's not actually the most classified of the networks because they're locked down solid. Like nobody is getting near that. So what we're really mostly concerned about is the day-to-day networks, the ones that everybody is using to do their email and to check Facebook and to do all the other things, the nuanced things that happen on a day-to-day basis when, you know, someone's having a lunch break or whatever. So those are the things that we're most concerned about, and still we have that whole user piece. Yes, we're still there. Assets are important. Understand what your users are doing with those assets are also very important. So you know, it's kind of really going back to basics and going back to a little bit of compliance about actually understanding what you actually have in your organization. And it's really surprising to me how many people don't really know what they have. So we live in a very complex world where I am, and trust me, we are trying very, very hard to figure out what we have, because that's the only way you're protecting it, and that's the only way you're going to prioritize what's important. I'll let you go.
I'm wrapping this up, I guess. I'll be bold. I don't think you should be forced to choose which incidents to prioritize and which ones to ignore, right? Because that's the recipe for failure. So I'd say we love to be cynical in cybersecurity. I think that's part of our DNA. And we love to criticize, you know, technologies that sound a little out there. But I'd say it's time to give some of those technologies another look and see what they offer. Some of them are all buzzwords. I get that. That's accurate. But some, like Pamela was saying, automation. Right there, I mean, there's that concern that those the automation technologies could, you know, are never as accurate as a human. But when they're replacing tedious, repetitive activities, you'll find that a human commits so many errors because it's tedious, it's repetitive. So it's so prone to error that the machine will do it a lot better. And it's never replacing the human. It's actually augmenting the human because it's doing the job that the human is not doing, is not able to do because it can't scale. So I'd say, you know, it's definitely a good time to give those technologies another look. I'll throw it out there. I know you'll hate me, but machine learning, artificial intelligence, those are technologies that are evolving, you know, for the vendors that are actually defining it in the right context. Are definitely helping prioritize and not prioritize really, but tackle it all as much as you can, knowing that, you know, it's nearly impossible to do it all. You shouldn't be forced to just focus on those that are red.
Okay, that's a great segue, because this wouldn't be a panel that I was involved in if I didn't hurl some accusations at somebody. And I'm going to give you a chance to start out first.
Penalty.
But it seems to me, a trend that I've noticed is that the vendors, when they're coming to me, have got me all scared about the nation states. And just when I think I might be starting to be safe from that, they say, and the insider, Bob, he's going to take your organization down. And then I've just finished handcuffing Bob to his desk. And they're like, and back to the nation states again. I feel like I'm getting played. What's going on here? Which do I need to be concerned about? Is it the nation state, the insider, those hacktivist guys? What is it?
Well, what happens is sometimes the nation states leverage an insider to get in, and then there you go. You get a meta.
You asked, Gary. You asked.
So we've seen that. I mean, not necessarily at Splunk. Won't attach it to a vendor, but throughout my career, I've been exposed to customers and agencies that have expressed, you know, and told us stories about insiders that have been, you know, connected to the nation state and taking their agenda into the organization. So it happens. I'd say, again, you shouldn't be forced to prioritize who's the biggest threat. Hacktivists, insiders, nation state, you should just be prepared for all of them. And those technologies, machine learning, very much, again, another penalty there, very much designed to help you detect the insider threats and make sense of all of that data to detect what's not, you know, evident or not following a cookie cutter technique. So yeah, you shouldn't be forced to really prioritize between those folks. Right now, nation state is pretty hot. We're, I'm sure Canada's you know, feeling that pressure with recent activities and things. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But yeah, so in the States where I'm from, we have another one here. We keep an eye on all of that. I think also if you're in a government agency, you'll find your priorities over there, whereas whether you're in a corporation, you may have other priorities when it comes to maybe insider threats over, say, nation state or hacktivists.
Anybody else? Nation state, insider, both, neither?
If I was a gambling person, I would say the insider is always going to be the winner.
Interesting.
Yeah, because really in the long run, it's like death by 1,000 cuts because every single day we have lots and lots of incidents, and not the majority of them are from people doing things that are silly. Or
that's one of my favorite
by
quotes.
accident.
Is the FBI director who says it's not his biggest concern is not a cyber Pearl Harbor level event, but this death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's what we're seeing in day to day and being desensitized to it. And then you forget that Bob's in there and has different interests than your own organization.
Yeah. We have a lot of Bobs that we can hire.
Yeah, I think one more point to highlight, right? There is no perimeter to secure anymore, right? The users are everywhere. They're coming from any device. Applications are everywhere, right? So everybody in turn becomes an insider because you are always on. You're always accessing something. So you want to make sure that you have addressed that risk because of perimeters exploding, no physical boundary to secure anymore, and also when applications are residing in the cloud as well as on-prem data center being accessed by users off-net, on-net, how do you trust them? Is Vaishali really the Vaishali? Is she coming from a company-issued device and is accessing the application that she's supposed to? So I think it is very important to make sure that you have that zero trust or a trusted framework, even for an insider. It becomes paramount in my opinion.
Exactly. So what Vaishali was just talking about is what I was talking about at the beginning. And so I think if you think about it from that context and you apply zero trust, I'm so glad you brought that up. Because we are talking about users and their applications and the content coming across our network. So it's not so much trying to figure out and chase everything down. But again, if you've got zero trust as your foundation, it really becomes irrelevant. Quite honestly, I'm so bored by the conversation of actors versus insiders. I mean, I feel old because I feel like I've been at this for so long. And dear God, are we going to talk about one other kind of threat type? It's probably you and I are around the same. No. But that is it, right? So just getting the fundamentals down, going back to that zero trust, so you have that visibility at that cross section of your users and the content and applications and all these new devices that are coming onto your networks. Because the minister was talking about, this is digital transformation. Things are changing. And the reality is, even if you're not government, even if you're on the commercial side, or actually probably even more so on the commercial side, your competition is going to be adopting this technology. And the beautiful things that you've done here in BC and the examples of using blockchain, this is innovation. This is here to stay, and this is going to continue. And so your competitors are going to do it if you're in the commercial space. GovBC is doing it. So do I hear any other states in Canada doing it? So it's going to up the ante all the time. So making sure that you've got those fundamentals down as those devices keep being added, as you're adopting new cloud services, back to what Vaishali was saying. This is possible, people. The digital transformation adoption is possible with security, but it does take some work, some hard work.
Okay, so
more hours for you, Gary, sorry.
Yep, I'll just start manufacturing hours in the day. No problem, I'm used to that. So what about those organizations that are failing to pay attention to the cyber risks? What are they doing? I know there's ones out there, they're saying, maybe I can fly under the radar and not go noticed. Maybe I don't need to do this stuff. What's going to happen to them?
Depends how big they are. I think if your name's Sony, nothing will happen to you. Like, who else can take 3 major breaches, have 70% of your assets wiped, nuked, lose all your IP, and still recover? I'm just saying, and that was the 3rd time. So there is a bit of a size factor, but yet I've done some work with sort of startups and innovations and things like that, and I've had a bunch of them hit with ransomware, and they lose 70% of their company when that goes down, and they have had to work through, how do I figure out the Bitcoin to pay off this thing, right? So I think it actually, it sounds nasty, but it does depend a bit on your size. And that is, you kind of got to figure out what's at risk. But if you're just starting now and you don't have that momentum behind you, you could risk it all a little bit. And I'm not trying to panic anyone. I just mean that you start now so digitally aware, right? Whereas you don't have that heft to push you through that breach and bring you out the other side.
Yeah, and it is interesting that when you see the breaches and you see their share price, they did take a big hit. And then if you look at it 2 or 3 years later, they've come back from that. So Equifax took a $5.5 billion, what they called a setback. I wish my own personal finances allowed me to call that a setback. But as you say, they recovered. But in the process, whether it's a Target or an Equifax or others, I think the board of directors was sacked, and so were all the C-level executives. So if you're, this is where I usually like to tell people that if your security department is always the department of no and being a pain in the behind and telling you can't do stuff, you should fire your security team. But if as a C-level executive, you think you're not going to be held accountable when it does happen, you should fire yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be held accountable. Being able, trying to say, like, ignorance of the law, no excuse. We all have papers. We see the organizations getting breached. So how do you get the attention of these stakeholders, and how do you get them to invest? Because some of them are in this room. The folks at your IT teams have been trying to figure you guys out how to get your attention. How do you do it?
So I think it's just like we do fire drills. We need to do security cyber drills, right? We need to send out those phishing campaigns to see how the employees are reacting. Because trust me, very, very educated employee would click on it because those emails look so real, right? So you need to do those fire drills and cyber drills. And then you take that data to your stakeholders and show them how many people failed. How many educated people failed these tests? So think about any other normal people who are not paying attention to where the email is coming from, what it says, and things like that. Another one is show them what kind of threats are coming into your network on a daily basis and how you're catching them and how much you're missing, because it's important to show if you don't give me enough budget, I'm going to keep missing these threats. And remember what I said earlier, hackers only need to succeed once, but we have to succeed all the time. When we do Cisco Live, which are our massive customer events, we see so many Bitcoin crypto mining operations just on a guest wireless network, not on the corporate network, but on the guest wireless network, right? So like even an event network like that could be very easily used by the crypto miners. And probably you would think it's not a big deal. Crypto miner is just using my machine. I'm not really using my machine. But the fact that they are able to get in and use your machine makes you most vulnerable. That is the next layer of attack is already in the progress kind of thing. So those would be my words, right? Show the data to your stakeholders, how many threats you're getting, how many you're able to catch, how many are passing by, and do these cybersecurity drills so that you continue to train and educate your employees.
I think one of the things that's interesting, going back to, again, the silos that I alluded to, whether you know that they still exist or not. I've been in so many meetings where the security operations teams and the DevOps teams are all arguing over who has the greatest level of security expertise and how things are done this way, and no, this is, this is the right way to do it. Fundamentally, what I see lacking is a shared responsibility. I think in many ways, we've lost track of what the importance is, what we're all trying to achieve. So even with the practitioners that I hire on the teams, that have worked in industries as security practitioners, if you ask them fresh out of their roles, what does their CIO care about? What does their CEO care about? They'll start talking about protection of data. And it's like, no. Go higher. Think about even a chief of police. They think the chief of police is worried about protecting data. No, that chief of police is worried about how many lives I lost in my area today. That's the fundamentals of business. And I think many times our practitioners are losing sight of whatever it is that's important to your business or your government or what have you, so that you can all find that common denominator that you can all come together around. So whether you're DevOps or you're SecOps or you're the IT team or you're the finance team or whatever, maybe you all care about the stock price, as employees of that company, or whatever it is that you can resonate with across these team cultures. Start there and try to then frame up your stake in it as a shared security responsibility. Because otherwise, I think we're going to stay somewhat in silos, going back to your question about getting them to buy in as a stakeholder. That's just mine.
I think we got to get away from the sky is falling kind of approach too, from security's perspective. I find that often, people are scared of us because we always like the bad news folks. So we got to kind of make it meaningful to the business and to the executive level, and kind of put it in a simple term that's actually relatable to them. And often we're not good at that because we're like geeky and we like to talk, security speak and all that other things. So we need to actually go back to the basics of actually having those good dialogues with folks and actually say what is important to you, and then make our argument successful in that we're actually, working with them as a partner. And again, to the silo thing, I agree with you 100%, because lots of times we don't get invited to the space because everybody's terrified that we're going to tell them no, or we're going to convince them somehow that they can't do something. So I think us too, as security people, we have to be smart about understanding the business needs. And once we actually understand that, I think that we're kind of moving more in a synergy approach.
So I'll add that, so there are two tiers here, right? You have the C-suite and you have your board. When it comes to the C-suite, as you explained with your examples, it's a very personal story, right? Because if everything goes awry, you're canned. And there's a motivation there to try to elevate and find the budget that couldn't be found, or prioritize investments and resources, et cetera. When it comes to the board, they care about two things: keep me away from the headlines and operational costs, right? So keep me away from the headlines, that's a story that can be told via having a well-oiled running security team in SOC. Operational costs, technologies like automation are very good in proving that return on investment and showing, this is operating really smoothly and it's returning this, and it could have cost this, but it's now costing this less, or you're saving this much. So those stories, we're at Splunk, we are often asked to help take that story to the board and tell that story to the C-level, and we usually use those two approaches because it's a different, is a different driver for both in order to invest. It's very difficult to hire an executive that just came from that organization that got hacked. That's their biggest nightmare. So then it's a driver for them, right? Not only job security, also keeping the business thriving. But as you show, the business will continue to thrive, but the C-suite has disappeared, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so that brings us kind of to the focus of this panel here today, which is how do you go about achieving tangible and measurable, because this is the key for the folks that are out there right now. They want to see, I invested $1 million, what did I get for that? Measurable cyber risk reduction. How do you do it? This is the tough part.
Well,
Do you want to go?
I'd say there are KPIs that you can measure that, right? And my CISO wouldn't be allowed into a board meeting without reporting on those, right? So from an operational standpoint, but also time to contain, time to detect, percentage of visibility and how accurate that percentage of visibility is. So it's very important to keep track of that, not only as a way to show, hey, we're doing our job, but also this is running really well. Without that, you wouldn't probably be able to prove that.
I would have said having a defined outcome that you want. So oftentimes we're very much defined for sort of putting a capability in, but not actually defining the outcome. So I got to have a thing. I got to put a firewall in. What's your firewall going to do? It's going to block some stuff, right?
Yeah.
But it's far harder for a project to say, like, total number of calls to my CERT has to go down. Like, whatever you do, I don't care how you do it, but the outcome has to be improved and measurable. And there is some awkwardness in making that kind of a sort of an outcome-based metric, but you sort of have to define that, I think, if you really want to show value. Otherwise, you end up just showing, to be honest, kind of stats, like, I was doing 10 gig. Now we got 20 gig going and things like that. So I'm very focused, and I think this is kind of related to the last point, which I think all my colleagues made the point, which was about outcomes and sort of knowing really what the outcome is. But I would say if you're going to show measurable risk reduction, it's that.
Well, and I'm going to tout like the ISACA capability maturity model, and also the fact that they're actually creating a cyber capability maturity model. And I think that it's really good for us because I don't think that we measure cyber, and we're not measuring that in that space right now. And I think that we need to go there. Security, we've got different types of IT security controls and lots of frameworks that we're following. But then at the same time, like, what is our maturity level? Where do we want to go? How do you want to advance your business? It's really important to actually consider that, and we need to start thinking about that a little bit.
So Ollie talked about automation again. So I just want to posit, if you start looking at automation and what percentage of automation that you've adopted in fighting all the good things that we've talked about that bore me, like the state-sponsored actors and the insiders. But you just think about that measurement of automation. There are a lot of metrics that fall out of that, which she was alluding to, that are operational expenses, right? And so if you're a CFO, that's pretty significant. So depending upon who you're talking to, who that stakeholder is and their view of the world, it could be a risk reduction, it could be an operational expense reduction. But again, with something like automation from a security standpoint, you're going to be able to measure both. So you're going to be able to look across and say, how much fell out that wasn't able to automate? How many man hours did I ultimately have to spend then? Or on the flip side, because I automated, then I spent fewer man hours. Just think about it. Fewer man hours configuring, fewer man hours on maintenance. There are so many things that fall out of that. One of the other things, going back to a company that was named previously, was looking at is the events per analyst hour that were reduced within the Security Operations Center. So if you just want to look at the SOC operations itself. So there are a lot of different ways that you can use metrics. Yes, you can do it against frameworks, and we know, as Sherry was alluding to, we have probably more than we actually need of frameworks. Pick a good one and align to that. The other part of it, quite honestly, that I think I'm still shocked after all these years that we're not paying enough attention to is the patching cycles and how fast we're mitigating the vulnerabilities. And so I think I understand that it's challenging. All of us are tasked. Gary works long hours, and many of you in this room do. But I think if there's something that we can refine down to a fewer number of days where we're patching critical vulnerabilities or even non-critical vulnerabilities that come back to bite us, and using that as yet another metric. So again, depending upon the level of stakeholder you're reporting to, but those are some other things that might be worth looking at.
I have just one stat to share. It's okay if you don't have all the KPIs and all the frameworks and all the comparison, because it's a journey, right? As someone talked about maturity model, you just need to see where you are in the maturity model and how you get to the next step. So it's okay to not have the plans and have everything covered, but recognize that there is a need to invest. Here I am in the maturity model. I have to get there. So how do I get there? There is only 16% of CISOs say they are able to get visibility of 75% of their threats and being able to address them. So everybody out there is struggling, not just you. So have that kind of sympathy for yourself, because I know it's really easy to kill yourself. Like, I'm really bad, I'm not able to protect all the threats and all those things, but everybody in the industry is struggling. It's a very complex problem, and threats are evolving at a rapid pace, right? I mean, I've done both networking and security. It was so easy to learn networking. A couple of my friends here were like, you learn few RFCs and IETF standards and you're done. Security, it's like, I have to read up every day. It's like, how many days I have to do this? I've been already doing it for 22 years, right? So think about it. So it's very complex. So it's okay to make mistakes, but just recognize that you are in that maturity model and you are at step A and you need to get to step B. So.
Yeah. I think Gary used to say it every time when we were working together. It's like, just a little tiny bit better today than it was yesterday. Just a little tiny bit.
No big bang. So one theme, and I've got to admit, I'm dying to ask the panel members this because one of the challenges that everybody in this room, I think, is facing is the talent shortage, right? Okay, so forecasted to be 3.5 million shortage of talent by 2021. Previously, it was 2 million by ISACA, but it's almost doubled from that. And I read a stat from ISC Squared that we're already at a 3 million global shortage in cybersecurity globally. And then I read on LinkedIn today that some professor out there decides that we don't have a cybersecurity talent shortage because his students aren't getting interviews. And my phone could barely contain my comments on that topic. I said, stay tuned, there'll be more later. So what of it? Do we have a talent shortage? And anybody who says no gets uninvited from the stage. But more so, I don't like to just sit there and admire a problem. What are we doing about it? What are we doing to inspire people to get into this area? I know my 2 other talks today were at SFU, and I was on a rant. I'm trying to get people interested and excited about working in security as a challenging and rewarding career.
Yeah.
So do we have a shortage, or are we all good?
No, I think we all do. I mean, every one of us are trying to hire people, and we can't even find that talent, right? So I think that, you know as well as I do, Gary, that here in BC, what we're doing now is they're actually getting into the schools. So middle school, we're starting a campaign with a lot of the middle schools, and we're going in and we're taking like experts from the industry, and we're saying, hey, someone want to volunteer a couple hours of your time, and we're going to go to school district number whatever, and we're going to talk to the kids today. And we're also doing these sort of talent, little symposiums in which we're bringing students and we're taking them, whoever's interested, maybe 20 or so, and we're going to bring them into the industry and into our offices and say, look at what we do every day. Sometimes it's kind of boring because we're like all sitting at computers, but I mean at the same time too though, we can make it cool and bring them to the SOC where, you know, Gary is, or I can bring them to National Defense and, you know, show them around like a, you know, a warship or something. You know, it's kind of a fun...
Just another day for Sherry.
So, you know, like,
Warship.
really, like, in order for us to actually build that talent, we got to start. And a lot of people are saying, like, let's get into universities and colleges and start there. No, they're already, you know, the ship is starting to sail by that time. So, really, we're targeting grade 7, 8, 9s. And we're actually starting the movement now. And I think next month and in March, we're going to be working with a lot of folks in the school districts and actually bringing the kids, and we're going to go talk to them and have some fun with them and bring some of our hacker friends over and get them to do a few demos and things like that. So I think I would encourage everybody here to actually try to promote the same sort of thing in your areas where you live.
So I think I already mentioned automation. So if we're going to continue to chase things manually, we will most definitely have a people shortage, and we will continue to for the rest, at least, of my life. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, because I'm responsible for the cyber ranges at my company, and it's a really interesting real-time interactive experience that students, I'm going to call them students, practitioners can come and utilize, where we throw real-time threats at them and they act as the blue team defending these threats. But that's all well and good, and some people have probably heard about cyber ranges. Gartner did a report that they issued last December talking about how large enterprises are going to grow from less than 1% to 15% using cyber ranges to train their teams today. But what we found on the journey is something really interesting to me. And our CIO, Naveen, and I talk about this a lot because there have been some aha moments. That you can cross-train people right now that you don't think of as the security professionals within your organizations. Security is an interesting field to many of your practitioners. You may not even realize it. Not security practitioners, right? So one example that stands out to me is a young lady that was with our facilities organization who we put through a mock cyber range, where when we first rolled out the class in Amsterdam, we decided to put some friendlies in the classroom to test our instructors. And these were friendlies meaning our own employees from across the company. And this young lady sat there and was fascinated by the cyber range and actually had a good time during the cyber range and said, you know, I've always been intrigued by cybersecurity in general. And I really am convinced I can do this now, and I want to change career fields. That was somebody in our facilities organization. And she had a great propensity for it. She did a great job in the cyber range. And it was an example to me of one of those aha moments. And Naveen has seen it as well with our IT teams who are running help desks. Our help desk teams are bored at all of our organizations. They're bored. That's not their long-term career track. And so if you can entice them with the goal of getting them cross-trained into cybersecurity, they're fascinated by it. They already have a technical propensity, and they have a great willingness to learn. And so we've had a lot of our IT teams now, our help desk teams, convert over and be a part of the cyber range program. Those are two examples. And then the UK Defense Department did a really interesting study, I think it was with IBM, where they actually did this very thing, where they took existing skill sets and they put, it was a much more formal experience than what we did with the cyber range, but they actually tested people within the UK Defense Department that were in non-security related fields for their propensity to do security. And I think they spent a lot of money probably with IBM doing this study, but it gave them, again, good data points to prove that you do have this propensity within your existing employee rank. So while I think we need to do things all the way through the food chain, from K through 12 right on up, there is some hope within our organizations right now to try to mitigate some of that skills shortage. So just wanted to throw that out. I thought it was so interesting with the facilities lady. I was rooting for. I thought it was great.
Yeah, the thing that inspires me is that in some jurisdictions they're working on repurposing or retraining folks like veterans. Like,
Yes,
we don't need to
exactly.
manufacture brand
Yes.
new human beings.
Absolutely.
And one of the stats that I heard, and this one just caught me cold, was the Scott Jones is the new head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, and he looks at me and he says, you know, if we had as many women in cyber as we do men, we wouldn't have a talent shortage in Canada.
I did hear that.
Let that sink in for a second. That's incredible.
That's great.
It seems to me that's got to be an easier problem to solve than cloning and other technologies. It's like, and one of the more disturbing thing, I have 2 boys, I don't have girls, but a parent said to me, and you need to get in there before grade 5, because by that point, they're already convinced that they can't do the job.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's true.
That's sobering, right? So anyways, I knew that I didn't want to let the folks in this room get out before I had at least 3 rants. I really need everybody's help in here, because I stopped to think in the last couple of weeks why we still have this such significant challenge. I believe that it comes down to 3 myths. This is my theory now. It comes down to 3 myths. One of them is that cybersecurity is solely an IT problem. Please help me in correcting that. It is not an IT problem. It is business enterprise risk above all. Everybody in this room should understand that. As much as we are very aware that our security folks love to come to TELUS and that we need a DLP and our DMZ for PCI, it's like nobody even talks like that. And you can thank me later. The BC government did a talk on communications for IT and security professionals, and we recorded it, and it's on the website, and we'll continue to do it throughout this year to help people understand that normal people don't talk like that. The second thing is that the worst thing that can happen from cyber is that my computer is infected. That is absolutely not true, and I would hate to find out that we're gonna learn that the hard way. And the third one is that the cybersecurity is the responsibility of the security staff. Between those 3 very damaging myths, I think we're doing a significant disservice to this industry, and I hope that all the folks that if there's anything I want you to take away, that would be it. But I really need to open it up to the panelists to say that if there's one thing that you want the C-level executives and others in this room, feel free to top up and say what Gary just said. What's the one thing that they should take away and go back to work on, whether it's Wednesday or if they're back in the office Tuesday morning, they're not attending this fantastic BC Aware event that's happening. Actually, I got one other thing to comment on just around the talent. And it's just that I know that Surrey had a really amazing, successful hackathon on Friday.
Sponsored by Cisco.
Oh, excellent. Led by Tom Levasseur, and very engaged a bunch of students in this and getting them interested in cybersecurity. And we have none other than Kerry Augustine and his team here. Tomorrow, they're going to be leading students all day through their challenge and kind of hackathon on. And I think that's the best thing that's going on here. I see the rest of us having wild, debates while in passionate agreement with one another. We're like, yeah, we should do security. Yeah, we should do security. But the students in there, inspire them. Drop your head in. I know Kerry's going to hate this because he's got work to do. But I always like to. That's the most important thing for me is to get in there and inspire those folks and show them that security is not just policy, architecture, and governance, which personally bores me, and there is more to it. But again, what about the folks in the room here? What should they be doing when they go back to work? Is it go give their cybersecurity person a hug?
Yeah, they should.
We all need a hug
Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, I think you know that you're going to get hacked, right? It's not a matter of if, it's when. So at least run an incident response services drill to make sure that when the breach happens, you are ready. They're pretty much all the vendors sitting here can help you create that plan. So leverage your vendor as a partner and make sure you have an incident response services plan, how to handle the breach when it happens, so that you have least amount of damage and your name is not showing up in the newspaper. That would be my one simple takeaway. Have that plan. Have that New Year resolution that I'm going to create an incident response readiness plan.
Now, I'm acutely aware that a lot of folks out there have trouble with this. It's like, oh, it's all well and good, you said create this plan. But we're trying to do everything possible in BC government to remove those barriers and make it really easy for people. So to that end, we even have a template on the BC government webpage that is an incident response plan. It's in Word format. You can download it and use it for free. Just please don't make a mess of it and then give us the credit. But anyways, other tips and things people can do?
I wanted to, you changed the subject last time, but I did want to support the notion that there may be enough talent. Just a minor comment, because I think we're asking the wrong questions. That's one thing. But I'll talk about that later, because we're on to a different topic. But it follows into your comment that people think that it depends on security. I think if you have a role called a chief security officer, you will always move that accountability to that role. So the future, I would argue, and I've got a friend in town who thinks the same, would be that there probably shouldn't be a chief security architecture, because it should be embedded in engineering, design, operations, all that stuff. But one thing to take away is go put two-factor authentication on everything. Come on. Get it done.
Yes.
That is it.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
So I know I said this earlier, but I say the first thing to do, and immediately, it's to switch that thinking that you have to prioritize, or you are forced to choose, or you can do it all. I'd say give audit your processes, tools, people, and figure out what to optimize, because the technology is out there to help you. And if you're looking at it as I'm going to prioritize in this, and this falls to the wayside, then that's a recipe for failure for sure.
I always like to say, listen to your experts. Don't think that you're the expert. Listen to your experts, and like we always say, everybody wants to be a security person until something bad happens, and then everybody runs away and says, "Oh, it's those guys." I think that's important, and I think too, it's also important to try to go back and appreciate the work that everybody's doing in your organization, saying, you know what, let's just try to get incremental success every day, and that's the simplest answer, I think, is really, it's like, don't feel like you got to go and throw $1 million at something. Just try to do a little bit better.
And then I have said automation. What's your plan? So that would be the first thing, because it's going to reduce a lot of the pain that you're already feeling. But the second part comes back to the silo point that I made. Get your stakeholders together and get on a level playing field across everyone. Don't allow the SecOps and the DevOps and the IT and other divides to remain. Figure out what your shared security responsibility is and what metrics you're going to collectively sign up for. Because I think the silos and back to the processes are hurting us just as much as our lack of automation, really.
Before I open up for some questions, the audit thing, I'm not sure that we need to convince the people in this room to do audits. My sense is that you guys are probably auditing the crap out of yourself and everybody else constantly. My question is, have you actually made any progress? Have you taken those learnings and invested them in and created a better kind of ecosystem overall? I love some of the themes that are coming out here with you don't have to just pick one thing to focus on. We see a lot of the solutions-based ones is all I have to do is put in a SIM and I'm covered. That's another thing. If your security folks are saying that, they should be fired.
Wait, what?
And if you fire them, then we'll more talent for the rest of us. Anybody have some questions? I would encourage you to take advantage of the experts that are on this panel. And I know we have many in the audience as well. Any questions that are burning for you folks?
Sorry, Grant Drinks in the city of Richmond. So I read a recent study recently that indicates that 93 or greater than 93% of data breaches in the last 3 to 5 years have been cloud-based. So this propensity to move to the cloud, I think that we're all trying to have this digital transformation and just get there fast in that, and we're forgetting about the rigor and the thought leadership about how do you now make sure that that's secure.
Now, normally I'm not going to dive in and grab the first one, but I'm going to have to because you stole those lines right out of my presentations. Because I walk out there and I say that if you look at the trend, all of the breaches are cloud breaches. And it's not just that they're all cloud, they all appear to be Amazon. The other thing is that none of them are Amazon's fault. Until recently. I'll get back to that. What they are is the fault of the organizations failing to take advantage of the security controls that Amazon and other cloud providers made available to them. So we're really trying, and we're not there just yet, we're really focused on getting contracts in place with cloud providers and working through some of the privacy and risk and security challenges. Where I want to focus my time is educating people on secure configuration and use of cloud. But that's a sore spot for me right now because, but then again, Amazon just took 2 in the nose just recently here. So anybody else's thoughts?
I think you cannot outsource your security to cloud providers. Like at home, I'm sure at the main door you have 2 locks. So your first lock is your whatever basic security cloud provider provides, but then you have to have that pervasive security everywhere: campus, branch, data center, public cloud, private cloud, and many customers have multiple public clouds: Google, Amazon, Oracle, IBM, you name it, right? Microsoft. So you want to make sure that you have a cohesive single policy that threads through every deployment, right? The policy needs to follow the users and applications, not the other way around, right? So you have to have two locks. One is your cloud provider security, basic, but then on top of that, your single policy and all the pervasive security that you have deployed.
I'm going to say two-factor authentication.
I totally
like that.
agree, but
Yeah.
you got to understand
just
some of
saying,
the reasons why. It's like even
That's a hard
nobody's immune out there. Like I don't know
Yeah.
if there's somebody from Deloitte here, but like Deloitte has really good security practices, but then they don't go and enable MFA on one of their cloud instances, and they too get hit.
Yeah.
MFA, like passwords are dead. There you go. That's the fourth rant that I'm going to put out there. You're still relying on passwords. Make a plan to get off them.
Yeah.
They're almost worse now than no security at all, because they give you that false sense of security that you're okay. If kids out there can protect their virtual gold with MFA tokens in World of Warcraft, you too can protect your assets with MFA as well.
Good one.
It's not even real, as much as they say. Thoughts on cloud and move there? Are we reckless abandonment chasing it, or is that the future? That's where we need to be, right?
I don't think we have a choice,
Yeah.
sadly. So interconnectivity is creating this connectivity, right? Or a disruption, I guess, of connectivity. But I would agree. MFA,
Use
for
MFA.
sure. Yes.
Yeah. And Vaishali's points about,
Pervasive.
the pervasive security everywhere and not relying on your cloud providers. And because if you do start relying on your cloud providers, most of you are using hybrid approach as well, right? You might use, 2 different providers, sometimes 3 different providers. The U.S. Defense Department has taken the cloud journey. They've taken an interesting approach where they virtualized their data centers first, and to get the Defense Department comfortable with the idea of virtualizing and then the idea of cloud. So they started there, and then they moved to something that looked very much like a cloud from a private sector standpoint, though. And now they're moving such that you can adopt a full commercial service and both classified and unclassified environments. But when they did their evaluation, there were 71 vendors. And of course, some of that is counting SaaS providers as well, as the infrastructure and platform as a service providers. 71 vendors. So just step back and get a process in place where you're going to evaluate how many providers you want on your network, and then do an approach that enables you to orchestrate security policies and capabilities across multi-vendors. You don't want to have to be getting a security team or a DevOps team that knows Amazon, and then another one that knows Azure, and then another one that understands Google. You want to think across the board for as much orchestration across all those as possible, so you get the fundamentals. But 71 vendors, and I'm sure that's probably not a large number for some organizations. There may be many more, but that's staggering. I mean, just trying to keep up with 71 vendors, just cloud-related services, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I face it every day. I get the cloud is more secure. I usually counter with, cloud can be more secure. I don't trust and verify. That's what I always do. Any other questions? Dave?
Yeah, I think Marc mentioned. So I want to talk about people, automation in the future. I think there's all things we're talking about. So security analysts, there's a couple articles today, and it's quite well known. Security folks have learned through experience. Lots of years of experience digging through log files, incidents, learning, continual learning. You become architects eventually. And we're talking about automation now. And automation is somebody else's algorithm. Is there a new role out there for somebody who actually understands how to use the automation to actually take it and now understand what's happened in their network? You don't actually know the algorithm. And by the way, you haven't had the experience of learning how to do it. So I'm really curious, who actually uses this automation to actually figure out what my problem is now?
So it's funny you say that. That's something.
I can't figure out where that skill set is.
So at Splunk, we typically identify that while maybe some of the tier 1 analyst duties and responsibilities get augmented by automation, and there's concerns about that role going, away with automation. The role of the automation engineer, the role of the security content developer is now arising. It's that person that it's actually optimizing those playbooks to that automation is running. What you're looking, to be quite honest, technology is making it so easy that you don't necessarily need that super skill tier 4 practitioner, but it could use that in order to really understand what to put in that chain that really automates that playbook that runs in order to get that orchestration going. That is one. The two roles we've identified is that one. The ones that are creating the algorithms, the dashboards, the visualizations, the analytics, specific analytics, and then the one that is optimizing that automation.
One of the, if I understand your question right as well, one of the questions sort of is who's using this automation? And if you look at something like a cert role, like you're going to get an event, and then you're going to sort of take that IP, do a lookup, what network's that from, and do a DNS thing, and like do an LDAP thing. And there's about 10 different steps you got to do, right?
Yes.
And those are awesome for automation because it's still the same person responding to that incident, but rather than spending an hour doing ticky, 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 you kind of, the automation does that for them so the event's presented like that. And then post-event, there's a series of activities which are kind of the same, tell 5 people, do this, this, and this. So in terms of in that case, for example, the incident response person, technician, can create that automation rule. And maybe they need help translating it to whatever tool you use, but they know the steps that are taking. And then they can also be the consumer of that in the end as well. And it just gets them to that resolution where they're actually doing more meaningful work, post doing all the ticks and the boxes just to get it kind of going. So at least that's the way I sort of interpret what you're saying. And I think, I think we're all going to be big supporters of automation.
I think any integrated solution can take the automation and push a policy down to your network access layer where the threats are entering, right? So think about automation not just from a process perspective, but the automation built into a security and networking architecture, where once the threat is learned, that depending on the severity of that threat, an automated policy action is created, and it's pushed to the entire networking and security infrastructure so that threat is now stopped from executing on the endpoint, on the network, and the cloud, right? So think about it from that perspective. So we use that kind of automation very much in our entire portfolio to learn as much as possible about the threat, create a score about the threat. Based on the score, create a policy, and push it to the right places. So,
and I think that's all we have time for today. Please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their information with you today.
Good job.
Justin, it's over to you.
Thank you very much to all of you. And in lieu of speaker gifts this year, what we've decided to do, and Gary mentioned that Kerry Augustine and his team from the Canadian Cyber Defense Challenge is here today. What we're doing is we're going to make a donation on your behalf to the Canadian Cyber Defense Challenge that, as Gary said, there's going to be 10 groups of students competing for the big prize here tomorrow. And that is absolutely one of the things that we're quite passionate about at ISACA Vancouver and BC Aware is getting the next generation of cybersecurity professional engaged and involved. So thank you to you, Kerry, for being here and your team. And thank you to our panelists, even Marc, the thorn between all of those roses was pretty darn good. And thanks everyone for coming. We've got another half an hour or so to do some networking and whatnot. But again, thank you very much.
You're good at this sport.